Hello and welcome, I'm Ali Mustafa and this is Straight Talk. The United States and its allies attack suspected Syrian chemical weapons sites. We look at the fallout. Plus, stuck in limbo, we head to northeast Turkey where thousands of Afghan migrants are stranded. And we take you to the historic city of Van, which has become a tourist hotspot. The United States, backed by Britain and France, has launched a series of missiles on targets inside Syria. The blitz came in the early hours of Saturday, April 14th, in what the U.S. described as an attack to destroy Syria's chemical weapons infrastructure.
The purpose of our actions tonight is to establish a strong deterrent against the production, spread, and use of chemical weapons.
Meanwhile, Russia has condemned the U.S.-backed strikes, calling them an act of aggression against a sovereign state.
It
is crucial that we see the evidence. We are told there is a proof available, so we would like to see it.
Turkey has welcomed the U.S.-led airstrikes in Syria, saying it was the appropriate response against Bashar al-Assad's suspected chemical attack.
There should have been reactions like this to all the chemical attacks that took place in the past. The regime should be held accountable for their actions. And it's not just the chemical weapons. So many others, including children and women, were butchered using conventional weapons as well.
And joining me now to discuss this further is Ahmed Badir, who is the president of the United Voices for America, a non-profit organization. Thank you so much for coming in, Ahmed.
Thank you.
What do these airstrikes by the United States mean, and what can we expect in the next hours, days, from all sides, including Russia?
I think in the next few hours and days, people will just take credit. On the American side, the president will, as he already did, tweet, "Mission accomplished. It was a huge success. Look at me. I'm standing up. I'm defining what the red line is." Unlike Obama, who did not respect the red line and lost a lot of credibility around the world.
He kind of cornered himself by, tweeting about it, telling the Russians the missiles are coming?
Well, in a way, not only that, but he was also telegraphing what he's going to do. He was always criticizing President Obama in the past. Why do we keep telling them when we're going to strike? Why do we keep doing it? In the meantime, all week long, it's coming, it's coming. In fact, even the French president said what the targets would be, the 3 targets. They knew what was going to happen there, and the Russians and the Syrians evacuated those air bases. They took everything out that was sensitive, all the weapons, all the personnel. Not a single death, not a single person died from over 100 missile strikes.
That's what I want to get to. Last year, about over a year ago, you had 59 cruise missiles, Tomahawk missiles, making their way to Syria to deter Bashar al-Assad.
Right.
It almost seems it's on repeat.
Well, I criticized that because I felt like it was a slap on the wrist. Again, they told the Russians through this, I forgot what the phone line is called, but some sort of de-escalation type of contacts that when and where they're going to target, and they evacuated the air base. There was very little damage that was done. Within hours, if not days, they were back operational. And it seemed like it was a slap on the wrist, which to me is interpreted in Damascus as a green light to continue to kill more Syrians, and that's exactly what's happened. And now they've used chemical weapons again, and the chemical weapons, which we thought was completely gone, eliminated. Now we hear today.
Well, let me play the devil's advocate. It's quite difficult in a situation like Syria. You have the OPCW in 2013 going and getting the stockpiles out. It almost seems like a delay tactic, but the Russian counter-argument to that is that might not even have been a chemical weapons attack.
But there's definitely chemical weapons that were used somewhere, and with all these targets, and again, from the briefing that the Pentagon held this weekend, they're basically saying that they targeted 3 facilities that they know are stockpiling and making chemical weapons, and that's not even the extent of it. There are more of them. Well, we thought that this was eliminated, and if they knew this last year, why didn't they eliminate them last year? Today's excuse was, well, last year we only targeted the delivery mechanisms, but not the actual core and the heart of the program.
Or whatever.
So, last year was 59 missiles. This time it's 105 missiles. It took 1 hour. It was overnight. And they took all extent to minimize all type of casualties. And so we now know that they have the precision not to kill civilians. However, which they could also have the precision to take out Assad. What this tells me is they don't want Assad to go, that they want to prolong somehow the war. And this is
they
not...
as in who? Who are you talking about?
All the different parties, because for
well,
different
the bigger
agendas,
picture here, the bigger picture.
the proxy war that's happening.
Not the Americans, surely.
Well, there are elements within the American government that use this, what's called the honeypot. They'd rather have all the terrorists and all the bad guys to be in one place fighting each other, contained. Because as long as they're fighting with each other, they're not out fighting Americans in Iraq.
All right, you're talking about good guys, you're talking about good guys, bad guys, bigger picture.
Right.
Pull out a bit. You've got Iran. The leadership just came out following this attack, made a statement condemning it. You've got the Russians who are calling it an act of aggression against a sovereign state. You've got Turkey that has, by and large, welcomed this as an appropriate response against Bashar al-Assad. It's no longer Syria's war, is it?
Right, no, it's all these different parties and everybody has a stake in this. Sure, Bashar al-Assad is a bad guy and he needs to be defeated, removed, etc. He's done so much damage to his own people. But despite all the rhetoric that's happening, especially from the Western powers, when it comes to France, all the actors that targeted the air base, they can actually do a lot more if they really want to remove Assad. But a lot of it is just rhetoric. There was a lot of tough talk this week about going after Assad. But at the end, what does it really mean? In the long term, it's probably not going to change the balance of power.
Tomahawk missiles landing, as you said, on empty sites.
And on the Syrian side, they're seeing it as a victory. They came after us and we defeated them. We intercepted their missiles. So everybody's going to claim victory at the end. In the meantime, the civilian populations are continuing to suffer.
And nobody's even talking about what happened in Duma, right?
Right.
With all of this.
Yes, and at the end of the day, what really the administration in the U.S., and I'm an American, I love my country, but I'm critical of how they're handling what's happening in Syria. And when it comes to what basically they're telling the world is, an Assad, kill as many Syrians as you want, as long as you don't use chemical weapons. We're not against the death of Syrians. We're just against how you kill them. So as long as you don't use chemical weapons, then continue to kill hundreds of thousands of people. And that's exactly what happened. And if they get displaced, if they become refugees, we're not going to take any of them into Europe or in America. Imagine this, in America, in my country, this year, we've only taken in 11 refugees.
And it's already created a storm of sorts.
Right. If our administration, if Trump, because a lot of it, they invoke this humanitarian about caring for the people and how this is inhumane to use chemical weapons. Well, why don't we really help the Syrians and the people that are fleeing to provide them with better lives?
While this attack was unfolding by the Americans and their allies, a few hours, days earlier, Bashar al-Assad had consolidated his position not just in Duma, but much of eastern Ghouta. Does this war end with Bashar al-Assad's victory?
Well, I don't know if you call it victory, but it definitely looks like Bashar al-Assad is going to continue to stay. Syria is going to be carved up. Right now, you've got North Syria going to the Kurds and the Americans, and they're satisfied with the oil reserves that are there. And Syria's influence extends to the sea, which with the natural gas resources. And then the rebels have some different areas within Syria. Will the Americans, when they pull out, are they going to negotiate to force the Kurds to negotiate with Assad, to accept Assad as their leader? Turkey has its own problem with the Kurds because of the PKK that's there. At the end of this, it looks like Iran is kind of losing out because their position is not looking as strong as it was before.
But that could be said about the Russians as well.
That's correct. And at the end, I think the United States is trying to remain relevant. How? Because as you heard today, they're saying, well, this is providing a lot of steam behind the Geneva peace process. And there's two competing peace processes here. There's one, the Geneva route, and then there's the
Astana-Sochi route.
Yeah, Astana-Sochi route. And the Turks and the Iran and Russia, they're pushing the Astana-Sochi route, which leaves out the Americans. So America can afford to do that. This attack keeps them relevant, keeps them involved, and in a way it looks like we're championing the cause of the people, but it's a lot of rhetoric and little on delivery.
Well, that was the rhetoric that Theresa May also, when she came out, gave details. They used a barrel bomb, she said. A helicopter was above Duma when the attack took place and a barrel bomb was dropped. Some of the evidence that they're piecing together, but quite rare that they're laying it out in the open like this right now.
Right, well, they have to justify the use of this. And there are many competing interests. I mean, Trump himself is in trouble at home. This to him is a better distraction than talking about Stormy Daniels and the Mueller investigation, all this other stuff that's embarrassing to him there. And he wants to show that he is tough when it comes to the war on terrorism. We keep hearing a lot about the mission that is to defeat ISIS in Syria. ISIS is largely gone in Syria. Now there are other problems. Who's going to clean up what's happening there? We have, it's yet to be seen.
Ahmed Badir, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Tens of thousands of civilians have been killed in the war on terror in Afghanistan since 2001. The situation in the country has worsened in those years, with all sides sharing the blame. A government airstrike this month in Kunduz killed dozens of people, including children. The bloodshed has led to an exodus of mostly young men trying to flee the violence. More than 1 million remain stranded in Europe, Iran and Turkey. Some are now being deported back to the country they fled, as Omer Kaplan reports.
A walk away from poverty and terror. These Afghan migrants have smuggled their way via Iran into Turkey. And like 20,000 others who've taken this journey over the last 2 months, they've already covered hundreds of kilometers on foot. But they're prepared for another 1,000 more, if it means they'll make it to Istanbul.
We have been walking day and night from the border. There's a war in Afghanistan. There's Daesh and the Taliban, and there are no jobs for us. I heard that there are many jobs in Istanbul. I want to go there and work and send money to my parents back home.
So far, more than 3,000 of them have been caught and sent back home. The rest usually end up here in Erzurum, where they're held in centers like these. And the head of the city's migration management says, considering the risks they face along the way, these migrants are fortunate to make it this far.
Especially in this geography, people smugglers are very active. Lately, they've fooled Afghans into coming to Turkey. They've taken their money and put them through a dangerous route. When they are caught, they come to an immigration removal centre like this, and we evaluate according to international asylum seeker laws if they could stay or should be sent back. In the meantime, our guests have access to security and leisure.
And Najibullah says he really does feel like a guest.
From Afghanistan, I came to Iran with my passport. After Iran, I was smuggled over the border into Turkey and was then caught by the Turkish gendarmerie. I applied for asylum and I'm waiting here for it. I don't want to be sent back. We have everything here. There is hot water, food and medical assistance. I really love Turkish hospitality.
There are around 170,000 Afghan migrants in Turkey. The country is also home to 3.5 million Syrian refugees. Turkey's Prime Minister Binali Yildirim has said Turkey will build a refugee camp on its Iran border to deal with the influx, but reassured that only those with links to terror groups will be deported. Back in Erzurum, locals are also doing their bit to welcome those fleeing war. Afghans now call this man, Erdal Güzel, their godfather. He's a pharmacist by trade, but also helps migrants with their paperwork to gain refugee status, and afterwards he finds them work and a place to stay.
I didn't imprison myself into this 30-meter square pharmacy. The Afghan migrants are a part of my family. I accept them as a gift from God. It wouldn't be fair to compare migrants' life conditions in Turkey to the ones in Europe. Turkish people's approach towards migrants is humane. We saw such scenes that made us feel embarrassed. I saw a family who walked for 25 days holding a child in their arms. The Silk Road has become a road of shame.
The Silk Road once connected the East to the West. It was a route that fostered civilization with the exchange of goods and ideas. The same route has now become a target for people smugglers, but many fleeing the violence in their homeland say they're prepared to risk crossing mountains for a new beginning. Omer Kaplan, Straight Talk.
And joining me now to discuss this further is the Consul General of Afghanistan in Istanbul, Mr. Zakaria Barakzai. Thank you so much for being in the studio with us. Why are so many Afghans fleeing Afghanistan?
So first of all, thank you for inviting me to this discussion. It's a very important issue for Afghanistan and also for other countries when they're receiving or flood of immigrants are coming from Afghanistan. The thing is, we should understand that until 1978, when a communist coup happened in Afghanistan. Afghanistan was not a developed country, it was a poor country, but there was no refugees. A refugee influx from Afghanistan started with Soviet invasion. And after that, we had a very bloody civil war. And after that, we had the Taliban regime, and also fighting was continuing. And after that, we had the new regime in Afghanistan and collapse of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan, but fighting still continuing, and still continuing for the past 15 years. So I will argue that Afghans were not fleeing Afghanistan before Soviet invasion. They were poor, but they were happy in their country.
How is the situation? What I want to get at is you have more than 5 million people of Afghan origin spread across the world outside Afghanistan. More are fleeing. In Turkey alone, you had 96,000 Afghans in 2016. 2 years later, you have 170,000 Afghans. I just want to get my head around, how do you classify these people? Do you call them economic migrants, or are they refugees? Because different countries have different standards.
How I describe these people, of course they are refugees by all standards of human rights. When a person is in danger in a country, for sake of their life, they are have the right to move to other countries, and it's a human rights issue.
You've got 200,000 people of Afghan origin in Europe that are also stuck in limbo because the European Union classifies them as economic migrants, which includes a clause, and I want your comment on this, that they are not refugees, they are economic migrants because they are seeking better opportunities because of corruption at the highest levels. What would you say to critics who say that Afghanistan is in a unique position and these people are in a unique position? They're both refugees and economic migrants because of the violence that is perpetuated by high levels of corruption.
So my answer will be very simple. Please send your correspondent to compounds of foreign embassies in Kabul, and you will see what they are describing economic immigrants to real genuine immigrants when they are fleeing a hard time in their own country. Because nobody likes to leave their own country, their own villages, their own families, and through dangerous routes in coming to another country, another culture, another situation, with small kids, with women, with suffering throughout the routes far from their own countries. The thing is that because of lack of information to young people, in particularly in Afghanistan, about situation in Turkey, while as I know, for example, 13% of educated people cannot find a job, and human trafficking is a major issue here, because they are misusing the situation in Afghanistan in their own benefits. And they are arguing that Turkey is a good place because you can find a good job, and also there will be chances for you again to move to Europe. So because of that... Misinformation. So because of that, the first issue is that there should be a joint effort between Afghanistan, Iran, and Afghanistan on tackling the human trafficking networks. This is the first. The second thing is we have a large community of Afghans legally residing in Turkey for education, for investment, and they are law-abiding people, and they are contributing to the society, and they are living legally in Turkey. And recently, unfortunately, all legal channels for Afghans to enter Turkey or for additional restrictions were imposed on legal Afghans living in Turkey. So that channel should be reopened. And also, the most important point is public outreach campaign. The people of Afghanistan, in particular young people, should understand that it's not paradise. It's not a paradise, because Turkey now hosting more than 3.5 million Syrian refugees. And there is a lot of economic problems of their own. and the way to Europe is closed, effectively. So it's not the situation like 2016 or 2017. The situation has changed dramatically.
It's certainly a very important issue and something that we will be following up. Thank you so much, Consul General Baraksi.
Thank you very much.
Turkey's Van province is experiencing a boom in tourism. Thousands of visitors from Iran have arrived in the area. It reached a point where local businesses have had to innovate to keep up with the demand, as Adil Halim reports.
This is Rabia Parvana's first time outside Iran. The English teacher thought a few days in eastern Turkey would provide a valuable life lesson for her family.
I spend a lot to come here to know the people and to be familiar with their culture.
Many other tourists are on a return visit. Iranians make the trek to Van for several reasons. Some come for the scenery and the sightseeing of ancient buildings like Akdamar Church and Van Castle. Some are here for the shopping. Others come for this, the parties, and all that comes with a night out on the town.
To be honest, Van has become the Istanbul of the East.
This event organizer says he hosts special Iranian-only parties.
Iranians don't have an alcohol culture. They're not so into it. They like dancing, having fun all night, or just enjoying themselves.
Some come for a different experience.
I love you, Turkey! I love you, Turkey!
One of the reasons is that the rules are less strict here.
For example, in Iran, the hijab is forced for women, but in Iran is not forced. In Iran is forced, but here is not forced. You can be without hijab, and also some people they are with hijab. It's freedom.
Freedom has different meanings for different people.
I don't say it's a kind of freedom, because freedom is different from your view and from my view. Everyone is free, I think, because God created us to be free. And this is your conscience what to do. So we cannot say that if you remove your hijab, it's a kind of freedom.
More than 500,000 Iranians visited Van last year, and there's an increase every year. The city expects to welcome more than 700,000 Iranian tourists in 2018. A trend that is welcomed by tour operators here in eastern Turkey.
It's possible to see little Iran here, and that makes us happy. People are starting to learn Persian. It's beautiful.
For the last 2 years, Van has been working to get a share of the Iranian market. We go there to promote our hotel, but Van's capacity is insufficient.
Not coincidentally, the Van Shopping Festival falls over Nowruz, the Iranian New Year celebration. Visitors spend most of their 2-week holiday right here. As a result, hotels are fully booked. The sales pitch appears to have worked. When the English teacher returns to Iran, she'll be telling her students everything she learned on her first field trip across the border. Adil Halim, Straight Talk, Van, Turkey.
And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Ali Mustafa. If you've got any comments or suggestions, do share them with us at #StraightTalk. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.